Now, I probably wouldn't say this in front of white folk, but in front of y'all, I'm gonna speak my mind. Take it slow.
What's going on? What's going on, y'all? You are now listening to Rell Talk, the podcast. I'm your gracious host, Rell. You can always find out more about me on YouTube or Google by searching raleighrell or Rell Talk. Today on the show, I want to talk about this riveting speech that my First Lady, Michelle Obama, gave at City College in New York City. Then I want to talk about the Roots reboot. And then to close the show out, I want to talk about this 20-year-old white male swimmer from Stanford University who was convicted of first-degree rape and because of his good old-fashioned American white privilege, only received 6 months in prison. But before I touch on that loser, I'm going to talk about my First Lady, Michelle Obama. Now, Michelle Obama gave to me one of the most important and beautiful speeches I've ever heard at City College in New York City. Now, I don't want to talk about it too much because I really want y'all to hear it, because when I heard it, it almost brought tears to my eyes because she says what they don't want her to say. As a First Lady, they want her to be politically correct and not say anything to offend anybody. But Michelle is like, you know what, man? We about to move out the White House in less than a year. I'm going to say what I want to say. If y'all be mad, oh well, get over it.
When I wake up in a house that was built by slaves, and I watch my daughters, two beautiful black young women, head off to school, waving goodbye to their father, the President of the United States, the son of a man from Kenya who came here to America for the same reasons as many of you, to get an education and improve his prospects in life. So graduates, while I think it's fair to say that our founding fathers never could have imagined this day, all of you are very much the fruits of their vision. Their legacy is very much your legacy and your inheritance. And don't let anybody tell you differently.
Man, did y'all hear that? Did y'all hear my First Lady spreading that hot fire? Did y'all hear that? I guarantee you, some people was mad when she said that. You know, they call Michelle Obama and Barack Obama, President Barack Obama, race baiters. You know what I mean? They say that if they say certain stuff about, you know, being unapologetically black, that they're race baiting. And I think this was a speech, in my opinion, where Michelle Obama was saying, you know what? I don't really care what y'all think anymore. Like, I'm about to really hit y'all with this hot fire because, like she said, I wake up in a house every day, in a house that was built by slaves that hundreds and hundreds of years later is now finally occupied by somebody that looks like the people who built it. And that's deep because society and America don't want to have this discussion. You know, they don't want to talk about racism. They want to be racist all day, every day, but they don't want to talk about racism. And I think what Michelle Obama did was beautiful because when you're looking at, you know, young African-American women and young African-American men in that audience that hear her speak, they're thinking to themselves, you know what, there is hope for me, because most of us are going through 4 and 5 years of college without any hope. We're just going through the motions because that's what our parents want us to do. That's what, you know, our friends want to see us succeed. But really, we don't know what we're going to do because we know that the reality is when we graduate, our outlook on life and, you know, having a good life is not as great as if you were not black. You know what I mean? That's a fact. And for Michelle Obama to say what she says, I think it's riveting because we have to be proud to be black. You know what I mean? Like with my children, I make sure everything that my children see, they see themselves in it. I make sure about my daughter, you know, black baby dolls. You know what I mean? That's very important to me because, again, I want her to see herself in everything that she touches, everything, because let's be real. You know what I mean? The world outside is very cruel and can be very cruel to our little melanated babies. That's a fact. So, as I said before, I think that was wonderful. I think it was beautiful. I wish more people of power, more people, you know, who were in positions of power would say and do things to uplift the black community more, because we don't really need to hear this type of message from a rapper because, you know, we almost look at them like, get out of here. You know, you got your wealth by dope dealing or claim to be dope dealing. You know what I mean? We want to hear from somebody who literally made it, you know what I mean, from the bottom the right way, you know, getting a great education, you know, and building a family. That's what we want to hear. So I think that was awesome. Now, to segue into Roots, the reboot, anybody who knows me knows that when they said they was remaking Roots, I did not want to see it. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I didn't really see the first Roots. I was younger, I heard about it, but I didn't really watch it. And after my brothers and, a few friends was like, yo, you gotta watch it. It's really, really good. I was like, yo, why? You know what I mean? I done seen us as slaves in so many films. You know what I mean? Do I really need to keep seeing us as slaves? Like, why don't they show us as kings and queens, as we once were, and I think as we still are? Nevertheless, I broke down one day and was like, you know what? Let me watch it. I watched them all back to back. And I will say this, as a disclaimer, spoiler alert or whatever, the first one, meaning the first episode was 4, the first episode was the only one to me worth watching because it talked about and it showed how before the Europeans came and kidnapped the Africans, kidnapped us Africans, we were living as civilized human beings amongst each other. We weren't depending on anybody from the outside for anything. And once, King Kunta became a Mandinka warrior, it showed how he wanted to go to Timbuktu, to the universities, to learn and study with the best and the brightest minds from all over the world. Now, how many of us knew that Africa had the concept of universities before Europeans or before the Western world? I didn't know that. So that's something that I want my son to see because I'm constantly stressing to him about, being proud to be Black, being proud to be African. A lot of us, we walk around with this, I'm not from Africa mentality. My grandparents were born in New York or my grandparents was born in Florida, but we're all African. All right. I don't care what you say. And, I hear that, our brothers and sisters in the UK and in South America, that they're very connected to that African heritage. It's just us in America. And you know what? That's not all our fault. You know what I mean? That's not all our fault because we went through a type of cleansing in America that, no other African that was dropped off in a different area around the world. We went through a type of cleansing that no other African went through. I mean, they literally wiped us of everything and then gave us their religion. That's a fact. I mean, any historian would tell you that they wiped us of everything. They had to go through so many slaves in Brazil because of death from disease that many Brazilian slaves, many African slaves that were in Brazil, they kept up their African culture because they were replenishing the slaves so often because they were dying off so quick because of disease. You know what I mean? But in America, we came here, we stayed here, and we lived they were slaves for, 60 and 70 years. You know what I mean? There wasn't that many disease here. So, I mean, people lived for a long time, you know what I mean? And so you were born here, you had no recollection of your African heritage and you just became a slave. That's all you were. You know what I mean? That's why, Kunta was really big about keeping his name. You know what I mean? And he, was almost killed because he said, yo, my name is not Toby. My name is Kunta. And you can't do nothing but respect that. You know what I mean? Even down to his great-grandson or his grandson, Chicken George, like they had that same warrior spirit. And again, the very first episode was all that was worth watching for me because part 2, 3, and 4, it just told us what we already knew. You know what I mean? Slave gets sold, slave have a baby, slave gets sold, slave have a baby, slave gets sold. It was just like a reoccurring cycle, but that's something that we already knew. That's something that we were dealing with in our society from white America. I mean, the Europeans, they made sure they didn't care, if they were splitting up husband and wife, daughter, mother, son, dad. They didn't care. It was, you're nothing but a nigga to me. You're nothing but a slave, go with your new master. And that was kind of what life was like. So as far as that goes, like I said before, I'm glad I watched the very first episode because it was very enlightening to me and for my son, it's something that, I can reiterate and, kind of put a stamp on it that look at what we were doing before we were slaves. So on to the next topic of the show. All right. So for y'all that don't know, a 20-year-old student from Stanford University was accused of, before I go into all that, I'll let y'all hear it. So I'll let y'all hear it and we'll come back and we'll chop it up about it.
The letter describes in graphic detail with unflinching emotional honesty the hurt, pain, and confusion of surviving a sexual assault. For example, after being poked and prodded and photographed for a rape kit, the victim reflected, "I don't want my body anymore. I was terrified of it. I didn't know what had been in it, if it had been contaminated, who had touched it."
Her giving so many personal details, I could just feel the pain as she shared like really, really gruesome details.
For more than a year, she suffered in silence, the nameless victim of a horrible crime, at the heart of a case that was supposed to shine a spotlight on something happening largely in the shadows, campus sexual assault. On Thursday, at a sentencing hearing, she would find her voice, addressing the court and her attacker, former Stanford swimmer Brock Turner, directly. "We were both drunk," she told him. "The difference is I didn't take off your pants and underwear, touch you inappropriately, and run away." Her words struck a nerve, and when her letter was posted online, millions read her story and urged others to do the same.
You sympathize with her because she's giving this heartbreaking account with details, and it's just heartbreaking.
In the end, the judge sentenced Turner to just 6 months in county jail and probation. His victim had argued against a light sentence, fearing that it would, quote, create a culture that suggests we learn that rape is wrong through trial and error.
Alcohol can definitely impact your decision making. It is still you making that decision, and his refuse to acknowledge that he made an error in judgment that night definitely should result in him receiving more time than he actually did.
Man, y'all hear that? So let me kind of, go into a little bit more about, what his father said. Because this dude's father, who was a creep also, wrote a letter to the judge. And some of the stuff the judge said was even like suspect. I mean, you want to talk about, white privilege and them looking out for each other. This is classic case 101. So the father wrote a letter to the judge, and he, simply told the judge and told the court, his life will never be the one that he dreamed about and he worked so hard to achieve. Dan A. Turner wrote in a letter arguing that his son should receive probation, not jail time. That is a steep price to pay for 20 minutes of action out of 20 years of life. He will never be his happy-go-lucky self with that easygoing personality and welcoming smile, the letter says, noting that the former Olympic hopeful is now a registered sex offender. End quote. So what? Who cares? The dude should be in prison. All right? This dude should be in prison, all right? I mean, and then turns out the judge simply almost echoed, the dad's sentiments. I mean, the judge himself said a prison sentence would have a severe impact on him. I think he will not be a danger to others, the judge said, citing Turner's youth and lack of criminal record. Are y'all serious? Because he has no prior criminal record, that he's not a danger to others. This dude, let me paint y'all a picture. This dude was found on top of an unconscious female. All right. And they said he never really accepted responsibility, even in court, ever. There was a brother by the name of Brian Banks in California who was convicted of a rape that he didn't commit. Listen to this right here.
Brian Banks was a star linebacker at Long Beach Polytech when his dreams were shattered by a rape conviction. His accuser later admitted she lied, and now Banks is a free man. Eyewitness News reporter Miriam Hernandez is joining us live from Long Beach with his emotional day in court today. Miriam?
And you might expect a bitter man to emerge from this ordeal, but today Brian Banks tells the world that this experience has made him stronger, more patient, and ultimately a better man.
There comes a time when you have to let go in order to move on. The only thing I wasn't going to let go was this fight.
A 10-year fight backed by friends, family, and the California Innocence Project. A battle to show the court Brian Banks was wrongly accused and wrongly convicted. He was 16 years old, a top athlete with NFL dreams. It all dissolved after a classmate, 15-year-old Juanetta Gibson, passed a note to a friend claiming Banks raped her. It read in part, "He didn't have a condom on, and I was a virgin, now I'm not." Gibson won a $1.5 million lawsuit against the school. Banks got 5 years in prison, 5 years on parole, and a lifetime label as a sex offender.
And in this case, even though this brother was pleading his innocence, you should have heard the things that the prosecutor and the judge and the people in this town was saying about this young brother. I mean, they was calling him an animal. They were saying, he didn't deserve to live, that he should be thrown under the jail, all type of visceral, attacks at this brother when he was wrongfully convicted. Wrongfully convicted of a crime that he did not commit, and his whole career was over. I mean, let's be clear. I think the Atlanta Falcons gave him a contract, once he got physically back fit, to play football, but it didn't work out. And how could it? You were a star player. You go to jail for 5 years. There's no way you can get back to tip-top shape. I don't care who you are, because number one, you're 5 years older. And then you're playing against boys who are 5 years younger. NFL is a young man's game. And so I say that to say this, man. We living in a society where, your skin color greatly, determines how you be looked at by society, and ultimately by the court systems. You know what I mean? And you see this is a classic case. This young man, if you read stories about this young white guy from Stanford University, a lot of the articles, the New York Post, Washington Times, they're not even calling this guy a rapist. They're saying star swimmer convicted of sexual assault. Sexual assault is just a nice way of saying rape. But with this brother, Brian Banks, oh man, it was, rape. It was as if he was brutal, as if he brutally attacked this girl when she lied on him. But this little white kid from Stanford, this girl was unconscious, didn't know what was going on, and he forced himself on her. And then in court, wouldn't even admit to his wrongdoing. You want to talk about white privilege, man? There it is right there, classic case. That's all I got for y'all tonight. Thank y'all for tuning in. As I always say when I close out my shows, y'all go be great. And find me on social media. Instagram at raleighrell, YouTube or Google, raleighrell or Rell Talk, the podcast.